You're listening to BQN. Assimilate the audio.
Engage.
78 years have passed since the days of the original USS Enterprise. Now a new Galaxy starship has been designed.
Transporter Chief, beam our listeners aboard. Welcome to Galaxy Class, a Star Trek Next Generation podcast on BQN and the Fandom Podcast Network. I'm your host, Counselor Amy Nelson, and with me today I have Diplomatic Standard Bearer Kevin Scarf. Hello, Kevin.
Hello, it's good to be back and doing a regular show for a change.
Oh my gosh, yes.
That was a fun 10 weeks.
It was. Yeah, it was nice to have a week off because we had recorded that Batleth battle before.
Yeah. If people wondered why things sounded a little wonky, that was one of our very first StreamYard recordings and one of the first that I did without Amy around to walk me through it. It was pre-Picard, so some of the things we said, especially about preemptive strike, might not have sounded quite as important to canon as well, Rhea has a post later, and we'll talk about that. So, there were some things that we talked about, and that was all pre-Picard. So we did record that over 10 weeks ago. So.
Yeah, so good. Well, today we have a special guest host, Mark White from All Good Things. Mark, welcome to Galaxy Class.
Hey guys, it's nice to be back in Galaxy Class. Thanks for beaming me back on board. It's always a fun time when I can participate in the discussion over here. It's great.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. And how did you enjoy Picard?
Oh, Picard was fantastic. I absolutely loved it. I think, like a lot of people, watched most episodes again and again, and each time got something else out of it, experienced it in a different way. And it's great seeing, it was almost like seeing more TNG episodes 20 years on. So that was great. Loved it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, listeners, if you'd like to hear more of our thoughts, you can tune into All Good Things, where we had our escape pod and we gave little tidbits of our thoughts as we were going through. And we, had a good discussion time over there. So, all right. Well, let's check the communication array and see if we have any comments from our listeners.
Logs accessed.
So last week, as we mentioned, we had the Batleth battle, which was schisms versus preemptive strike.
Mm-hmm. And like I said, Rhea had mentioned, she had commented on that. She was giggling and listening to y'all discuss the importance of canon of preemptive strike. Yeah, and of course, that was pre-Picard. We had no idea we were going to see Ro again. We thought she was gone for good. And so that was kind of fun to listen to a pre-Picard episode. It was fun.
Yeah, I mean, who knew that we would be getting Ensign Ro?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that was a nice surprise. Mark, go ahead, read the next one.
Well, birthday boy Paul Wright Jr., he writes, great episode. So happy birthday to Paul. And I'm glad you enjoyed the episode. I also was smiling as I listened along. I always will listen to Galaxy Class, and I found the episode previously so enjoyable. There was a little bit of stumbles, but that kind of made it more enjoyable as well. The multiple beam-ins and whatnot, it just made me chuckle. So I thoroughly enjoyed the episode as well. So yeah, I'm there with you, Paul.
Let me just say, there were several things happening that day. We had just recorded an episode of Infinite Diversity. We were going to record a Hive Mind later. We had a very short window to record a Galaxy Class, and we had teamed up with Thad and Chrissie to do 2 episodes back to back, and we were in the middle. It just turned into a giggle fest because it was a marathon podcasting day.
Loved it.
Yep.
It really was a fun morning of podcasting.
Yes, the all-day event of podcasting.
This is the captain. Senior officers will report to my ready room immediately.
Today, listeners, we are going to start inviting you to come on Galaxy Class to talk about next-gen episodes that interest you. And we're going to call this our listener's choice. And this was put forward by Rhea. Thought this would be a good idea to get the listener participation and to come on. And yeah, very excited. So please let us know if you would like to come aboard Galaxy Class to talk about an episode. And today, this is why we have Mark with us. Because Mark, you've been listening to Galaxy Class. I was trying to think, when did you start listening to Galaxy Class? Or was it
Earl Grey?
Earl Grey?
Yeah, so I got you guys on the tail end of Earl Grey, and I was like, what in the heck? What's happening? And then everybody jumped ship and started a new show, and I started following along from the beginning of Galaxy Class as well. But I remember I used to walk to work, and it would take about an hour to walk to work. And so in the mornings, as I was walking, I would put on podcast, and like I said, it was usually Earl Grey or early Galaxy Class, and I'd listen as I walked, and it really helped me start the day on the best foot.
Aww.
So much fun.
That's nice.
Nice. Mark, you have chosen a season 7 episode, Eye of the Beholder. So give us a little background. Why did you choose this episode?
Well, so I actually had planned on picking a Geordi episode because Geordi's my guy. And so I was going and I was doing research on that. And I also wanted to find something that I don't think you'd covered before. And I listen, like I said, every week. And I don't remember you guys covering Eye of the Beholder. And I don't know why it came up in my Geordi searches, because it's a totally Deanna Troi episode. But when I found it, I was like, oh yeah, that one. I love that episode. I tend to gravitate more towards the oddball psychological thriller kind of episodes, like Frame of Mind and things like that. And so that fits into that category. I also, I think the subject matter was really important. I have, had to think about mental health through most of my life. My life's been touched by, sadly, a friend of mine that has passed on. And, it is something that, I've struggled with in the past with, suicide thoughts and whatnot. And I think it is a very important subject to cover. And I think they do a really good job in this episode of seeing the ramifications of what happens to the lives around, that person, because that person might be thinking like all about themselves and in their head of like, I have all of this pain that I'm carrying and what am I going to do with it? But they don't necessarily realize the ripple effect it'll cause on everybody around you, And so this episode does a good job exploring that.
Yeah, very, very true. I do think that this discussion will be deep. So listeners, if there's any triggers that you might have with suicide, please be aware that we will be delving into this topic today. So Kevin, you just give a quick little recap of Eye of the Beholder for our listeners so they can remember what this episode is about.
So the cold open of this episode is Riker is called to one of the warp nacelles where a technician is acting strangely. And before he can stop him, this junior grade lieutenant jumps into the warp nacelle and basically vaporizes himself. So we have a mystery as to why this seemingly perfectly healthy and mentally capable man has decided to kill himself, which is why we bring in the amazing detective duo of Worf and Deanna. And so with her empathic powers and his security know-how, they do a thorough investigation into finding out why this particular lieutenant has done this, and they really can't figure out why, because it doesn't seem like something he should do. They discover that something is deep inside the ship that's been there since the ship was built. And as Deanna investigates further, it triggers something in her empathic/telepathic abilities, where she's getting flashbacks of a very horrific event that happened on the Enterprise before it left the shipyard. And from there, we discover who the real culprit is and how long ago things actually happened.
Wow, great summary.
Thank you.
It's like I just watched it.
I kind of did.
Yeah, very nicely done.
Thank you.
So let's just jump right into it. I really was impressed with Data and Geordi's conversation when Data comes up and he's like, isn't self-preservation, a strong desire in every living being? And why would someone choose to terminate their own existence? And I really feel that in this episode, they start with this uneasiness and trying to describe why someone would terminate their own existence. And then throughout the episode, we almost relive those reasons as we are relating to what Troy is going through. Because at that moment where she's, runs up and is wanting to jump in and she says, I know what I have to do. Like, all of that trauma comes back to these reasons of why someone would end their own life. And Geordi answers the question, Data's question, to the best of his ability, is like, well, maybe there's something wrong, something that you might feel powerless to fix. And I thought, man, that despair has to be so great because, as Data says, self-preservation, like, that's in our core.
I thought it was really interesting having Data discuss his own feelings about it, and the fact that they chose him to be the character to say that he had thought about it before. That kind of, I didn't remember that, and so it really flipped my switch. I was like, Data? What? And that's something I think really smart of the writers, because usually it's people that you don't expect. It seems like happy, bubbly, well put together people. Robin Williams comes to mind. You would never expect. Well, you'd never expect Data either. And the fact that his reasoning is like he didn't quite know what was going on with his head, whether or not the neural pathways that he was forming were going to work or not. And he thought about, well, maybe I should just start from scratch and do a heart shutdown, which would completely change his personality, because all of his memories would get wiped out. So it would essentially he'd be a new person, and that previous person would be terminated. So yeah, that whole thing. And it was also they brought a little humor to it for it being a dark subject when Data crossed his arms, because it was a serious subject. And so Geordi was leaning back on the console and crossing his arms and really like in shock and paying attention. And then all of a sudden Data sees him doing it and he's like, oh, I guess I'll cross my arms too, because this is serious. And it just shows that he's still learning about what humans do in these. It was a cute moment in a really heavy discussion.
Mm-hmm. And he seemed awkward about it too. It didn't seem quite right the way he had his arms folded. There was a hand sticking up in an angle that didn't seem proper, and so that was a fun little moment. Yeah,
that I did notice that too, and because Geordi's like, he was surprised to hear Data say, "Yeah, you thought about shutting yourself down," and I like that, because he was also. It felt like describing what had transpired with Lal in Offspring, where it's like, failing cascades and neural pathways. And, and when he was describing that, all I could think of was when they were working on Lal and trying to save her life. But yeah, and so Geordi's like leans back, folds his arms like, oh my gosh, Data, tell me more. And he awkwardly folds his arms like, oh, is this what I should be doing when I talk about this, type of deep subject? So yeah, it was good to have that little levity in there because it is a very difficult topic to discuss. And Jordy, Aston's like, well, why didn't you? And yeah, like you said, Mark, if you would have been a completely different person.
Mm-hmm.
You would have lost all that you had gained. And Data says, well, I looked at, instead of these obstacles to be avoided, I wanted to see it as a challenge to overcome and sort of just flip the script, which I think is easier said than done, because for you to try and change your mental thought process says when you are in despair is a monumental task.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes that's when reaching out to someone is so important.
I think, maybe for a lot of people that do take their own life, they might feel as though hope is lost. It's not so much that they really want their lives to end. I think a lot of them would prefer their life to continue, but without hope, they don't have much of a reason, right? And so reaching out, like you said, is that sort of looking for hope in some way. And I think that that's what Data pivoted to, as well as, well, I'm going to do this in the hope, and that was very human of him, that things would work out.
This episode also goes into looking at the signs of suicide, because they're in the investigation. They're looking at Daniel Kwan was the lieutenant who jumped into the plasma stream. Like Riker was, reviewing and talking to Picard about, well, he had a good evaluation and I even complimented him. And Troy says, well, in our last session, he was looking forward to the future. And we even see when they go into Kwan's quarters, the last personal log was him looking forward to spending time with his girlfriend. And then Worf asked the question, well, maybe there's a suicide note left somewhere. Like there has to be some reason. You just don't want to end your life. There's got to be something there. And I don't think that they really found it.
I don't think so either. And because he really had no reason, right? Like he was for all intents and purposes an exemplary officer who was well adjusted, who had someone who loved him, who communicated with his parents. He really was a victim in this situation, as opposed to, I mean, he is the catalyst that starts the investigation, but he's not really, it turns out he's not really a part of the whole thing. He's just another victim.
Now, I know that this is Galaxy class and you guys don't have assimilations and regenerations, so I'm going to throw this out anyway. If you want to know what that is, come on over to All Good Things. But this is regeneration for me of that girl they got to play his love interest girlfriend. I mean, did not look like somebody that just lost their partner at all. She got her makeup all done up. She's just like very casual, like, well, I don't know. I mean, I don't understand why, if he loved me, he would ever do something like that. It's just very like a matter of fact. Like she didn't seem torn up at all. And I'm just looking at her like, seriously? Like that is not, I mean, you could have acted it a little bit. Like there was like zero acting ability. She just came off like a Revlon commercial or something the week before. And then she came onto this show. Totally had no idea. Barely read the script. I think somebody just in the office thought she was cute and threw her in. Brendan Braga, I'm looking at you. Anyway, I don't know. I didn't get it. So it kind of took me out of the episode, because if you actually have been touched by somebody that has been through suicide, I don't care if you're just adjacent or close to the person or what have you, but there's this just, it's like the breath comes out of your body, and just this shock. and this deep contemplation and just this overwhelming sense of like, could I have done something? And she brought none of it. So it kind of took me out of the episode. Anyway, that was my regeneration.
Mm.
No, I get that.
Yeah, that's a good point. One of my regenerations, since we're talking, was when Daniel Kwan was standing and saying, "Oh, I know what I have to do," and then he jumps. He was behind the force field and then just jumps right through. What kind of force field is that? Not a very strong one.
It's a one-way force field to keep this is a headcanon now. It's a one-way force field that keeps the
Plasma.
the plasma or the radiation from entering the workspace.
Oh. Okay, I'll go
Thank
with
you
that.
for that, Kevin.
There you
Appreciate it.
Regenerations. Do I have any regenerations?
Our listeners are like, what is that?
I say, for me, Riker comes off looking like a bit of a cad here because he's like in his main scene after the cold open is him just hitting on some lieutenant that, you know, in 10 forward. And I guess Riker does what Riker does, but you know, I don't know. It was I like Riker and Troy. We like Riker and Troy to be together. And speaking of which, this really is the beginning of the Troy-Worf relationship, right? So we haven't really talked about that. This is Worf. Well,
parallels, wasn't that before?
Right. It is, but that was only really in Worf's mind at that point, right? Like he hadn't done anything to affect our Deanna. And this is the first time that Worf has made any motions towards Deanna in this timeline.
But is it really this timeline? Because I have a question. When does Troy's vision start? When is this the alternate? When is this a different reality? Because she's having a vision and all of this investigation is in her mind while she's standing.
For me, I think it starts the morning after when both Troy and Worf are called to sick bay separately, and they go down there, and that's when she starts having this vision of, not a vision, just a feeling of being a jilted lover because she's getting these images of Worf and the medtech Calloway. Was it Calloway? I think that's where she's really slipped into this image, into this brain change.
I feel that it starts much earlier.
Oh, really?
When she goes and she has the first experience, and then like all of a sudden everyone's gone, like Worf isn't there. Like the first time it's just her and Worf, and then she like gets dizzy. I feel that's when it starts. So the entire episode in my mind is a different reality. Mark, when do you think this different reality starts? How much of the episode is that Troy saying it was just a few seconds?
That, I mean, what you had said, Amy, that spot where all of a sudden Worf's just gone. I feel like it happens then, really early on in the episode. And I've always had that impression, like through all the rewatches, that it was at that point. It just makes the most sense because all of a sudden, like, her reality is changed, you know? So yeah, that's what I got out of it.
Yeah, but she slips in and out of it, doesn't she? And I don't know if she would have hallucinated the scene where Worf goes to Riker looking for validation of a relationship that hasn't happened yet, right? I don't think she would have, like, in my mind, she's hallucinating events where she would be present, and she's not present at that. So
that's a good point.
That's why I think she slips in and out of it, and it becomes more realized the morning after they've spent the night together.
Huh. You know, it's so trickily written, I guess, because I still am not ready to give up what I think, but I totally see what you're saying. And that's what makes it weird. And I'm always wondering, like, what part of the episode is just this empathic feeling that she's having? Yeah, I don't know.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
She was also under a neural inhibitor too, right? To inhibit her empathic powers. So
that seemed to make it worse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of did.
Well, I think sometimes being in this alternate reality sometimes can help you go through some of the process if you have lost someone to suicide. It was actually just yesterday we had Thursday, a student of mine, and listeners, if you remember, I work at a school that students are recovering from addiction, and a student has reached 2 years of sobriety. We were just so excited for him. 2 years, no alcohol, no drugs. And he, on these big momentous occasions and anniversaries, and they call them birthdays, the students share their story. And he was sharing with us his home life and just how terrible it was. And he said that it got to a point where he held a gun to his head and he actually pulled the trigger, but the gun didn't go off. I could not believe that a student at age 15 had already experienced so much despair that he felt that this was the best alternative for him. And I'm just so grateful that he is here with us to share his story. I was really close. And I cannot imagine. I cannot imagine.
Absolutely. It took a lot of strength to make the decision to not try again.
Yeah.
So that was very brave of your student.
Yeah.
Amazing. Hug him for me.
Oh, I did. I've hugged him every day.
So I had struggled with mental illness and thoughts of suicide for many years since I was very young, very, very young. And in my late teens, early 20s, I started, going to see help. And I ended up meeting a guy there who, his name's Matt, and he ended up being one of my closest and dearest friends. And he had issues with alcohol and depression and anxiety. And, they all kind of swirled around together as like a coping mechanism, and there were good times and there were bad times. And, we were there for each other for many, many years and through everything. And, through my ups and downs too, it's like I had no judgment for Matt and he had no judgment for me, and we could confide in each other. And he was just the most dear person, and very smart and funny. And he was an artist. He liked to paint, so creative, and loved to smile. And anyway, a few years back, he ended up taking his own life. And it's been very, very difficult without him because, he was probably my longest friend and my dearest friend. And I really struggled after it had happened, as far as not being mad, because my instant reaction was so much anger. Why would he do this to me? Like, we were a team, And we had, since we met, like I said, we went to the same therapist, 20 years ago. We met and went to the same, therapist, and through all the ups and downs and all the craziness of our lives in 20 years, we'd always been there for each other in spite of, other people coming and going from our lives. And then he was just gone. And it took me a while to heal and to let go of the anger. It was a choice. I talked to his family quite a bit after that time. His mother, actually, she was very, very kind to me. And she said that she didn't think that he would have lasted as long, if not for our friendship. And that meant the whole world to me. Now I have, some of his paintings at my house and stuff. And I try to remember him and talk about him as often as possible. It's another reason why I'm bringing him up today. Because I just want his life to have meant something and his memory to live on. Because he was and will always be a part of who I am. And so yeah, if I can get his name out there and talk about him a little bit, that's what I'm gonna do. But yeah, people, I think, in that situation, they probably have the mindset that, oh, well, they'll get over it. This person X will get over it, or that person, their mother, their father, their best friend, whoever. Oh, I'm not really that important to them. That's probably, what they're feeling. I felt like that before, as though if I were to not be on this planet, it wouldn't mean anything to anybody. But my friend, Matt, has proven that even though he might have thought that his life didn't mean something, it meant a heck of a lot to me. And it has changed, his leaving this earth has made a huge impact on my life and his mother's life and his brother and, nephews and nieces and stuff. We've all been affected, and we're all feeling his loss to this day, a few years later.
Wow. And, suicide can affect all walks of life. It's scary. I had a second cousin. Supposedly everything was going great. From the outside, he was going to university. He had a girlfriend, grew up in a great family, very supportive, 2-parent home, very well-to-do. And just from the outside, you're like, man, this kid had everything. And then come to find out, my cousin is telling us that her son committed suicide. And you just never know what's going through, that despair that someone can feel. Little tangentially, my mother, who passed away last August, she had leukemia for 4 years and went through 2 years of chemotherapy and just, fought. And then it came back again. And when she told me that she was not going to go back to treatment, it broke me. I was like, why, Mom? And again, there's something, I'm like, where's that self-preservation at this time for her? She had to have been feeling despair that this is just not anything that she can fight and win. Then it's like, well, sort of, if we look at the legality of it, is assisted suicide, should that be an option?
Well, and it's a quality of life issue too.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something that I'm very passionate about, is, like a woman's right to choose what's done with her body, but also like a human's choice to do with, their life, what they're going to do. And that is one of the few actual choices we have, right? So I've been affected by suicide, and I'm definitely not a fan, obviously, but I can understand, and this is, what talking about Matt has done, and talking about him with his mom and whatnot, is he had suffered 4 years in silence, and nobody understood the pain he was going through, right? And so part of the healing process for me was understanding that he held on as long as he could with the pain he was dealing with, for me, for his mom, for his brother, for all his friends. He held on as long as he possibly could, but he was dealing with that pain. And I think it's the same for your mom. It's like she tried and fought as long as she possibly could. But at some point it was a quality of life issue where, she wasn't living the life that, she had wanted to live. And she didn't want to necessarily be a burden to anybody else. Not that she was, but, she might have felt that she was, so she wanted to go on her own terms without the pain. So that's definitely understandable.
Yeah. And she kept saying, "Oh, I don't want to be a burden." I'm like, "Oh my gosh, mother." But that's how she felt. You can't say, "Oh, well, don't feel that way." Well, that's how she feels. So.
Yeah, I feel very blessed that this has not touched my life in any way, really. But you were talking about end of life decisions, and here in Canada, it is legal. Doctors can't be charged with helping someone to die if they meet certain criteria. There are criteria in the laws that say, that the person does have a right to choose, and doctors and nurse practitioners can assist. So we're pretty progressive here, and it allows that to happen.
Wow, I did not know that.
We should get back to the topic at hand, though, which is this episode. Don't you think?
Yes. And I think it does do a somewhat good job of exploring the survivors. So where they but they go talk to Ensign Calloway, who's Daniel Kwan's girlfriend. And yeah, as you said, Mark, like, she's not really that broken up about it.
Riker and Troy and Picard seemed more broken up about it than his actual girlfriend.
Right. And she just was incredulous. And she, one thing that she did say, I could definitely feel, it's like, I just expect him to come walking in through the door and everything's going to be fine. I definitely felt that.
Yeah, me too. But that was more of the writers.
Yeah. Than her delivery of it.
Yeah, than the delivery for sure.
Well, and then Troy and Worf, just Troy talks to Lieutenant Nara, who was Kwan's commanding officer. And do we know what species she is, by the way? With the weird nose prosthetic.
Let's see if I can find that out.
Yeah. Well, and she, as a commanding officer, is asked the question, did I miss any of the warning signs? Well, obviously, in this case, there's not going to be any because he was obviously affected by this empathic experience back at Utopia Planitia.
What I appreciate about this, though, is that even though the character took his life, because he had done that, Starfleet, Commander Riker and Worf and Troy, they were all able to uncover this other murder that had taken place, I guess, on the ship years back at Utopia Planitia. And so what could have been just a meaningless death almost ended up having meaning because it shone light on this whole other thing.
Oh, yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah.
So according to Memory Alpha, Lieutenant J.G. Nara was a nacelle control room supervisor. She was of a species whose distinguishing characteristics included enhanced facial ridges on their forehead and nostrils extenuated over their nose. So, no, we do not have a name for their species. In some non-canon works, she's identified as a Canopian.
Okay.
Not a Canosian?
I see what you did there.
We got to bring a little levity to this conversation.
You know, I need to remember this episode whenever we talk about, usually around Halloween, the scary and creepy episodes of Star Trek, because this one creeps me out. That Lieutenant Walter Pierce, I think his name is,
Mm-hmm.
he has this look that is so spine-chillingly creepy. And they play this music sort of at the end whenever Troy gets jealous. It's this weird sound that just, ooh, it's creepy.
It is like a ghost story in a lot of ways.
Yes.
Yeah.
They show the bones in the bulkhead and it's pretty creepy.
But again, that turned out to be not true either. There was no bones. There was just there were just some biological matter.
That's right. That whole thing was a hallucination.
Yeah, and Pierce was a hallucination too, right? When they're going through records and Troy says to Worf, "Oh, Pierce, I remember when he came on board this ship 6 months ago. He never did. He was never there."
I don't understand anything anymore.
Wait, what? Pierce was never on the Enterprise?
No, he died. He died at Utopia Planitia. He was the one who caused everything.
Oh, yeah, and it was his imprint because his
grandmother was a Betazoid.
Yeah.
So somehow his biological remains being in that nacelle triggered other people who have empathic abilities.
But wait a minute. So he still did kill that girl or guy? Who's the one that...
Did he kill both of them?
I think he killed both of them, didn't he?
Yeah.
And then he killed himself.
And then he killed himself.
It was a murder-suicide.
Oh.
Yeah.
Man, why is this episode so hard for me to understand?
It's
Because I don't know what's real.
Yeah. It is tricky. But that dawned on me today. It's like, oh, Pierce was never on the Enterprise.
See, that's what makes me think Troy's vision started way earlier in the episode. I don't know. Okay. So I wanted to ask, because when they, in Troy's vision, empath vision, they remove the panel, they scan it, and there's, bones there. I was wondering, have you ever found something intentionally left by home builders if you did any remodeling or getting into walls or anything?
I haven't found any bones, Amy, if that's what you mean.
Well, that's good.
I did do some...
Found a lot of skeletons in my closet.
I did work for a contractor a couple of times in my life, and we would go through, and I usually ended up doing a lot of the demo stuff because destroying things is a lot easier than building things. And I found sometimes there'll be some people will, for good luck, leave money in the walls, and so I found some money, not a lot, but some money in the walls. Also, some antique cars, like little race cars and whatnot, things like that. People will lock up in the walls for some odd reason or whatever, but never like a fully enclosed time capsule per se.
Mm-hmm. Strange you talk about money in the walls. When after my grandparents had moved out of their house and we were closing it up to sell it, we found money in the walls. Because my grandparents, especially my grandfather, they were of a generation, they lived through the Depression, that's what you did. If you had some savings, you saved it and you put it in jars and hid it in your house. So my aunt and my dad found hundreds, if not thousands of dollars hidden around the house.
Oh my gosh, Kevin, you totally, yes, that happened with my grandparents when my mom being the youngest and the one living closest to her parents, she would go and ransack the house, and she's in the process of cleaning it out. And yes, they lived through the Great Depression, and so they had food storage and cellars and cans and goods, and all like 20 plus years old. It was so nasty. My poor mother. But
back
she would go ahead.
So back in the 90s, my grandparents were still alive, and they had an RV, and it got stolen right out of their yard.
Oh, wow.
And it was found later abandoned about 100 miles away. What the guy who stole it never found was the money in envelopes that was taped to the underside of drawers.
Oh,
There were hundreds of dollars hidden in the RV too that the guy who stole it never found.
Oh my Lord.
wow. I don't think my grandparents were that creative, but they had money hidden. And there were times my mom would come back and it's like, okay, I've gone through the whole house. I think everything, I have found everything. And she'd always find thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
And in fact, my grandparents were so distrusting of banks that they took their money and made silver coins and invested in silver, and they had it stamped with their monograms. Yeah.
Wow. My grandparents didn't go that far.
And so she would come back. Okay, I think I found all the money. And then next month she'd go back. Nope, I found more money. I'm like, oh my gosh.
I would either go through that house with a
Metal
detector or a sledgehammer, one or the other, or both. Because if I found one of those jars, I'd be opening up all of the walls in this house. Nope, down to the bones, baby.
But no bones. We never found bones.
Oh, goodness. All right, guys. Well, Eye of the Beholder. Final thoughts for this episode.
I was glad to find this among the list of many, many amazing episodes of The Next Generation. I enjoyed watching it enough to watch it 3 times. And I found something different each time. Like this last time that I watched it, I hadn't noticed really, because I've been paying attention to the actors, I didn't notice what was going on in the background. And so I really noticed the detail they put in for the art direction of the nacelle tube. I hadn't really paid much attention. I knew they went in that room, but I didn't notice the tube itself until this last viewing. I was like, oh, wow, they did a really nice job sort of with, I don't know if it was a matte painting or whatever, to make it look like this huge tube and to get it the right size and shape compared to the actors. And it just all was really cool. And you get to see, this is something that I love whenever I'm doing a rewatch of TNG, is discovering more of the ship. And I always like Geordi and engineering, of course, and when they're crawling around the Jeffries tubes, that's always fun. But this was kind of cool because they had to go through the Jeffries tubes to get to this hidden room in the nacelle tube. And it's like, whoa, what is this? This is kind of cool. And I believe this is the only time we had seen what that room looks like, besides the time when we would see it after the fact in Enterprise, where they have that whole episode that's in a nacelle tube.
Oh, yeah, that's right. The name of that episode just came in my head, but then it left. I'm not that familiar with Enterprise. So Mark, as you were describing, that set piece, I at the same time was like, oh my gosh, they hopefully are going to rebuild this in Ticonderoga because they're rebuilding the TNG sets. I would love to see that room. Oh,
that'd be cool.
Right? Yeah.
It's probably not top of their priority list, but maybe eventually they'll get to it.
Right. Well, they've, gone through and done so much of the TOS different sets. So yes. Oh my gosh, that would be
engineering itself. I mean, what a piece of engineering that would be to recreate with the warp nacelle and the lights and all that. Oh my goodness. But it'd be to go there, see that. That'd be amazing.
This is a really great Troy episode. It gives her some nice, juicy moments to act. That the range of emotion she has to go through. I do like say what you will about the Worf-Troy relationship. I do like it here. I think it's fun to watch a sort of flustered Worf trying to dance around his feelings for Deanna. I think that's fun to watch. This has a lot going for it, this episode. It feels very different from most other episodes of Next Generation, which is nice to have something that has such a different feeling to it. This is a murder mystery, ghost story that works for Star Trek.
Better than that other ghost story.
I'm not even going to say the name of that other ghost story.
Well, you guys bring up absolutely good points about this episode. It is unique. It's got a different feel to it. And yes, Troy's range of emotions, like when she goes all crazy, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. When she's a woman scorned, man, she is fierce and like throwing things and shooting people. And oh my gosh. I do enjoy the Worf and Troy just because it's a little segment within the Riker and Troy. Like it's a little diversion, and it is very fun to see that interaction between Riker and Worf. Where it's like, Worf, it sounds like you're trying to go on a date with my sister. Oh, but it was just so cute. And it meant even more after watching Picard season 3 with the Riker. Yeah.
Yes.
Their banter back and forth, it just came full circle. I'm like, yep, they've been doing this the whole time. I loved it. Mm-hmm. And I really feel that this episode does a good job in, starting out and, sort of dealing with this difficult issue of suicide. And then it's describing what happened to Daniel Kwan, and then we get to experience it through Troy. I just think that's a very beautiful cycle that, bookends this episode. And I just think it does a really, really good job.
Agreed. Yeah, no, I think you're right.
Incoming transmission.
Well, here at Galaxy Class, we would very much like to have an open invitation that if you are dealing with thoughts of suicide or depression or anxiety and need somebody to talk to, please don't hesitate to call. We're giving you guys a few numbers to call. In the United States, the suicide prevention hotline is just 988. So it's the same as like 911. It's 988. And you can reach somebody to talk about your problems. It's there 24 hours a day. And it's free, one of the few things that are. So please, if you just need somebody to talk to, just call that number. In Canada, that number is 1-833-456-4566. And in the UK, it is 0800-689-5652. Again, if you're feeling any kind of thoughts of suicide or depression or anxiety, or just need somebody to talk to, those numbers are there for you. And there is trained professionals there that will help you process all these heavy feelings that you're dealing with.
And sometimes it's just nice to talk to someone who doesn't know you.
Mm-hmm.
That's true.
Yeah.
Well, we would love to hear what you thought of today's episode and hope you will join our Facebook group, the BQN Collective, to continue our discussion there. You can also tweet your thoughts to @GalaxyClassPod, or you can follow the network on Twitter and Instagram @BQN Podcasts.
Please hit the subscribe button on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts and leave us a star rating and written review that helps others to find the show. You can also follow the entire network's podcast with our master feed by searching BQN. This way you won't miss any of our fine shows like All Good Things, Union Federation, History with the Szilagys, Infinite Diversity, What's the T-Bab, Trexperts Quiz, and our newest show, The Captain's Couch. So, Kevin, where can people find you when you're not trying to talk with Riker about maybe having feelings for Troy?
Oh. There'd be a lot of people might be upset if I did that. So I'm going to stay away from that. And I will just say that you can find me here on Galaxy Class, on the BQN podcast Facebook page, which is the BQN Collective. And you can hear me mostly bi-weekly on True North Nerds, a geekery and nerdity podcast that I do with some local friends. Amy, where can people find you when Worf offers to make you breakfast?
Oh, wow. I will be right there. But you can hear me co-hosting All Good Things with Mark. You can hear me co-hosting Union Federation. I am on Twitter at Miss Amy Nelson, but my favorite place right there, BQN Collective. And Mark, when you're not co-hosting Galaxy Class, where can people find you?
Oh, great. Well, when I don't have the honor and privilege of co-hosting Galaxy Class, you can also find me on All Good Things. You can find me on Twitter at MarkWhite207. You can find me on the BQN Collective Facebook page. And if you become a patron of the network on Patreon, you can listen to my show, It's Green. And my last guest was Amy, and we had a blast. So there's that.
Did.
Priority 1 message from Starfleet coming in on secured channel.
So if you'd like to help us keep all of our shows coming to you each week, you can become a patron of the network on Patreon. We're putting up more exclusive content for our patrons that you won't want to miss, like It's Green or Amy's Math Moments. With a monthly Patreon subscription of $5 or more, you can join our meetings of the Hive Mind on the second Saturday of each month. Watch your Patreon messages for details. So for more details, go to patreon.com/BQN. A very huge shout out to our very own associate producers, the very Jim McMahon and the very Davey Willett. We are very grateful for your support.
At this time, we would like to thank our executive producers who make this all possible, and a special thanks to our guest, Mark White, who does our artwork each and every week, and for Joe Keegan for our music. Thank you for beaming aboard the Galaxy Class, and until next time.
Kapla?
Mr. Worf, you sound like a man who's asking his friend if he can start dating his sister.
Great joy and gratitude. Ooh, what if I stop it there? You're muted, Kevin.
I said, ooh, what if?
I know.
I didn't know what to say. It just came out. Like kapla?
That
means something.
With a question mark before.
It's more like kerplunk.
Kerplunk.
You know the game Kerplunk where you pull the little sticks out and the balls fall down?
Oh, yeah.
Kerplunk!
Where are we going, Amy?
I know. So, okay.
You're driving the ship.
I know. This is a tough
Like,
to
you're
drive.
driving like Troy. We're going to crash into Viridian 3.
We can salvage this.
All hands abandoned ship.
I repeat.
Escape pod.